A certain problem has appeared. The engine is consuming oil. The vehicle is a Gazelle with a 405 engine. So, lately this engine has been running on not very good oil, to put it mildly. Our oil scraper rings are probably stuck due to carbon buildup and deposits. We'll solve this problem with the help of Kerry's foaming cleaner for valves and combustion chambers. It removes carbon deposits without disassembling parts and is neutral to rubber and plastic. Start the engine and warm it up to operating temperature. This is important. Next, set the pistons to the middle position. Unscrew the spark plugs. Fill the cylinders with foaming cleaner and leave it for 15 minutes. Then fill them to the top with cleaner again and leave for another 30 minutes. Well, after that, we'll use brake cleaner. We'll pour it directly into the cylinders or possibly use carburetor cleaner. We also pour it directly into the cylinders, then remove all the substance that forms in the cylinders. After that, we crank the engine with the starter for about 10-15 seconds without the spark plugs. Well, to take a comprehensive approach to cleaning the engine, next we'll pour in oil with an engine oil system flush. Let it run for 5 minutes and then drain the oil. It's also recommended to install new spark plugs after cleaning the cylinders. Continued. Hello everyone, this is the Promotory channel. I'm starting a new series where I'll repair a car like this one. So a subscriber from Tula came to me for repairs and we'll be repairing the engine. We'll be repairing the gearbox. The engine is a MAND2866 LF31. Right now I already have one of the same engines in my workshop, also from exactly the same MN. I've already had a video about disassembling this engine on my channel, but it's kind of been on hold for a while. The customer has financial issues, so while some work is done and parts bought, it's still incomplete. So it's on hold. The engine has been in my workshop for 3 months now, and now the next car has already arrived for repairs with exactly the same engine, so everything is clear about the engine. We'll also be repairing the transmission. This car doesn't have a ZF transmission, but an Eaton. I don't know, this is the first time I've seen this. I don't know how common this transmission is, but this will be my first time repairing and taking apart a transmission like this. So it's also interesting to see what kind of transmission this is and what its design is like. So we'll have several separate episodes about the transmission. Probably, as usual, 2 episodes, disassembly and assembly of the transmission. And right now we have an episode about the engine, disassembling the engine. The customer brought a different engine, E. So we need to assemble at least one engine to install in the car. But if possible, we'll assemble the second engine as well. I've already disassembled the engine that arrived in the body. I also have a separate series about that. I don't know in which order the videos will be released, whether that one will come out first or this one. But the point is, we have two engines for this car, and we need to assemble at least one out of the two. We just took the engine out of the car today and brought it to NetSec literally an hour or an hour and a half ago. And I'm getting right to disassembling it. So as usual, first we remove the gearbox. We unscrew the lower bolts first, then a couple of the upper ones, hang it up and take it off. Then we unscrew the clutch. Well, obviously we unscrew the gear selector. Then we move the engine to the table, to the workspace. Here we unscrew the shift lever. Well, basically we start disassembling, everything as usual. So that's the scope of work we have. Let's go. It's already the next day for us. Yesterday I started working on the engine at around 6 post-meridian. I worked here for just a couple of hours, though during that time I removed the gearbox and took apart some things on the engine itself. Let me say a few words about the engine. First, we can see these coolant leaks between the second and third cylinder heads. It's all over here, like it was seeping out, like it was burning, with caramel-like deposits. So it's clear that it's been leaking for a long time. There are also these streaks running down the block all the way to the bottom. And here it was leaking under the pump as well. Well, if we look from the opposite side, there are also traces of antifreeze on the block. We can see more from this side. The heat exchanger is here and extends under the cover. It's hard to see here due to the turbocharger, but once we remove it, it'll be visible. I don't know how well you can see it on camera. We have serious problems between the second and third cylinders. And also, if we look here, we have black soot, which means the gas blew out. The gasket between these cylinders, gases are leaking between the heads. We can see this by the soot, by this carbon buildup. I don't see this on the other heads, but we can see it exactly in this spot. Everything here is black. What does that mean? It means we definitely have some problems with the gasket, that's 100% certain. But also it's possible we have problems with the cylinder head, or in the worst case, we have problems with the engine block itself. Clearly anything is possible. As usual, we won't guess. Now we'll take it apart and confirm everything. But it's clear this problem exists. We can see it. The cylinder head is also black with carbon. So I decided to disassemble the engine as much as possible on the spot. I don't usually do it this way because first of all it's inconvenient for me to set it up on the table over there. I don't have a crane beam here, just a hoist. If I had a crane beam, I could easily move it wherever I need and set it up the way I want. I have to move the engine onto the table, and it ends up at an angle. Since I can't use the oil pan, I have to set up supports and add wooden blocks, which isn't very convenient. The engine is sitting tall on the table, currently resting on the oil pan, and it turns out it's about, well, around 1.5 meters high, maybe a bit higher. And if I put it on the table, then I get this kind of height. And if I need to do any work up here, I have to keep jumping onto the table, jumping down, and so on. So it turns out that doing everything here is much easier. I don't know why I didn't do it here before. So now, I want to remove the compressor. I also want to remove the hydraulic clutch. Take apart something in the front, remove the turbo here, the heat exchanger, the alternator, the manifold, the exhaust, and maybe I'll even remove the cylinder heads here. And only after that will I take it over to the workbench and lay it on its side. I'll open the oil pan, remove the pistons, shafts and more. So today I definitely need to disassemble the engine, inspect it for defects and put everything aside separately so that I don't mix up all the parts. Because this is already my third engine like this that's disassembled in the shop right now. One engine is on the shelf, the second one I put over there on the far table. And now I'll also be looking for a place for the third one. Right now, I removed the fuel return line. So, here we have fuel channels. They're drilled directly into the cylinder head. This is the return line, and this is the supply line, which is located here. The fuel line is conical, carrot. Under the valve cover, the injector is already in place. So, this was our diesel return line. This is our main return line. And now I'll also remove these fittings and take out the so-called carrots. So, what else do I want to show? This tube that I just took out, this is the crankcase ventilation. The gases from the crankcase go into the air collector. There was a wooden plug like this here. We can see that it doesn't stay in place, and it couldn't fall out because the air collector was holding it, so it was moving around in there like this. And obviously some of the air was getting through this plug. So if we look here, we can see everything is covered in dust. The dust was getting into the engine, not in large amounts, but still. Let's take a look. remove the cylinder heads, what do we see? Well, I've already cleaned everything here. Now I want to measure the protrusion of the liners above the cylinder block. It feels like they're sitting very low. I cleaned off the carbon deposits here, cleaned off the rust and so on. We can see there are some issues with the block. The block will definitely go for machining work on the cylinder head mating surface. So we can see the second and third cylinders. Here are the partitions and we have some scoring here. For the gaskets, we can see that these areas are all black. You can see it here. That means we had gases passing through here. On this smaller one, and even more on that one, you can see this spot is black. So I haven't seen yet where the antifreeze is coming from. It could be from the cylinder head or maybe from under the sleeve. We'll keep investigating to find the cause. Is there anything else I want to say? The third and fourth cylinders are covered in oil. I just cleaned them and started blowing them out, and I blew out all these cylinders as well. We can see they're kind of dry. These two are dry as well, but the third and fourth ones are all covered in oil. So oil came out from there. Maybe the rings are broken, maybe the rings are worn out, so that's also something to consider. Well, what else did I notice? I don't know if it will be visible on camera. Almost every piston has a crack. Here we can see, it started from here and went this way. Next, the second cylinder. On the second one it's even bigger. It should be visible on camera. You can't see it on the third one. Everything here is covered in oil. On the fourth one, it's the same. There's a crack. On the fifth one, there's also a good crack. It should be visible on camera. And on the sixth one, there's a crack as well. So, even if the pistons are in good condition around the skirt and the piston ring grooves, we will still need to replace the pistons because of these cracks. And also the cylinder liners are worn out. I also have information that this engine has a mileage of 1,800,000 kilometers. And 800,000 kilometers ago, the owner, well, the customer, my subscriber, he replaced the liners, rings, and I think the connecting rod and bearings on the spot. A minor repair was done on the spot 800,000 kilometers ago. So, yeah, and basically right now the liners are still in pretty decent condition, let's put it that way. Well, obviously, if we're going to install new pistons now, we'll naturally need new liners, meaning a new piston assembly. I can't tell about the block yet. As I already said, there are definitely some defects here, but they can't cause such a coolant antifreeze leak. I don't know which one. Maybe it's leaking from the cylinder head somewhere. We'll wash the heads, maybe do a pressure test. Well, or as I already said, maybe it's from under the sleeve. But if it was from under the sleeve, although in the spot maybe, because everything here looks like that. Million interval, I don't eat. Problem. That's right. Yes, it should. Everything needs inspection. Now I'm measuring the jazz protrusion. It's basically here. We just need a general idea. The block is our 0 point, continuing. So if we output it at this point, it turns out the block is at 0. When we bring it to the GIZ, we see that there is a pit on the block. It's about 400, so the pit is 400s. And then the GIZA is at 0 again. So the GIZA relative to this surface of the block where there is no wear is flush. But we should have a protrusion, let me remind you, of 1/10. That's the ideal protrusion. During the previous assembly, the gizas were installed and adjusted incorrectly above the cylinder block. Because of this, most likely we have a leak. Let's continue. Through the gasket, let's check the third GIZA. Also, our block is at 0. Well, it shows 98. We bring it to the GIZA 95 and the GIZA itself is 0.2. Here we have roughly 0.04 of a millimeter protrusion. Now, the fourth cylinder, the block is also at 0. We bring it to the GIZA 96 is 5. That's a perfectly acceptable protrusion. If, for example, here we have 99 and here we have 5, that's already 0.06. The protrusion is normal. The fifth cylinder is 98, GIZA is 95 and 2, roughly 1 elsewhere. There's also a 0.03 protrusion. Sixth cylinder, 02. around GIZA988. GIZA itself is 4. Well, in general, we get a protrusion from 0, like the second GIZA, up to 700. So yes, on the 5th cylinder. I haven't measured the first one yet. Also 0. 9703. We have only one GIZA above the cylinder block that's within the norm. All others are below the standard, especially the second one. And as we can see, our biggest problem was with the second cylinder. So what's my task now? I'm taking the engine to the workbench and I'll also check the oil. Well, in my opinion, there shouldn't be any oil, but it's better to check. I'm taking the engine to the workbench, removing the pump, and I also need to check at what angle it's set. It should be set to 0 degrees. Still, it's best to check our current setting. We lay the engine on its side, remove the oil pan, and then take out the shafts and pistons. As I said, I must disassemble the engine today. Well, now we're taking a break and going to have some tea. Within the framework. So I took out the pistons and we can see that all the connecting rod bearings that are supposed to be in the connecting rod stayed on the crankshaft. What does this tell us? First, it means that the connecting rods are most likely deformed. The hole has become oval. They're stretched, so we'll have to restore the connecting rods. I repair them, do some repairs. That means the piston pin bushing as well as the seat for the connecting rod bearings will also have to be restored. Next, let's check the condition of the bearings. We can see some wear and scoring here, especially near the oil channel. It's almost like it has bulged out. That's strange, I've never seen anything like that before. We have the bearings here. Standard. I don't see the year of manufacture standard. Company KS will need to replace the bearings, and also we might have a problem with the crankshaft if they're sitting that loosely. There was some run out, but we'll take out the crankshaft later, clean everything up, and take measurements. So I'm taking out the camshaft and I can immediately see that the camshaft will need to be replaced. First of all, you can see that the lobes are worn down, they're low. You can see it visually even without measurements. First. Second, on the journal, on the bearing journals, there's wear. For example, on this journal, you can see these scratches and wear marks. And also, I can't take it out of those bushings right now, but most likely there are scratches there as well, maybe even more than these. And I've already tried pulling it as much as possible, but I can't get it out. So now, I'll have to take it from the other side and knock it out. So, the camshaft definitely needs to be replaced. Well, the customer did say that this engine has very poor power. He said he replaced the pistons at some point, and apparently worked on the fuel system too, but there's still no power. Turns out it was all because of the camshaft. The cam lobes are worn down and low, so the valves aren't opening the way they should. As a result, this affects the engine's performance. So I took out the lifters. We can see they also have defects and are chipped. That means the lifters also need to be replaced. Well, obviously, if the cam lobes are worn out, the lifters are almost always in this condition too. So the lifters need to be replaced, the camshaft needs to be replaced, and of course the camshaft bushings also need to be replaced. So now I'll take out the sleeves, and that's basically it. The engine is disassembled. We'll summarize the results. With the engine disassembled, let's summarize the results. So the overall condition of the engine is about a C, maybe even a C minus. First of all, there are some questions about the block. As I showed, there's a coolant leak between the second and third cylinders. And it turns out the seating for the sleeves, the seating where the sealing ring sits, here everything has already been eaten away by corrosion. In general, I don't know, there are questions about the block, there's no solution yet. Next. There are no questions about the camshaft. The camshaft is a write-off, that's 100%. The lobes are worn out. The main journals are worn. The camshaft is a write-off. As for the crankshaft, well, basically E. The crankshaft is, let's say, a solid 4 out of 5. There's some minor wear here. These longitudinal stripes, basically grooves. I measured minus 0.04 to 0.05 millimeters. I think it can still run. I've installed similar crankshafts before, and I think it's better to use one with minus 0.04, 0.05 millimeters than to grind it and use repair bearings. So this has already been proven over the years. So I'll blow through the crankshaft, polish it. About the piston group, so the pistons, as I showed, they have a crack. I think they all have it except for this piston. I think this piston was replaced at some point, but we can see that it has already suffered damage too. Its skirt here is all scored with grooves. Nothing good with the pistons either. They're scrap, and so are the sleeves. We also have questions about the connecting rods, the bushing, the repair of the piston pin bushing, and also this seating area for the connecting rod bearings. I think it's deformed. What's next? Well, it's clear the bearings are in this condition. Not very good, the connecting rod bearings. They're also worn out and scored. Also, for example, if we look at the camshaft bushings, we can see the scoring, right? I already tried to remove the journals that are worn and scored. They wouldn't fit through here. I knocked the shaft out. The cylinder heads are by the gate where I removed them. We'll take it apart and check it on the surface grinder. The fuel pump won't be sent for repair. The customer says it was repaired not long ago. We can see some paint here. They put yellow seals on it. Electrical equipment will also be sent for repair. The turbine will also be sent for repair. We're keeping the old clutch. We'll only replace the bearing. That's it. Yeah, we have an engine that's not in very good condition. Well, let's see how things will develop further and what decisions will be made. Next, we'll have a series on assembling this engine. It may take 1 to 3 episodes, we'll see. There will also be installation on the car and starting it up.